Fix that.
Okay, so we're gonna start this power hour, but we were muted. We didn't realize we were muted. So welcome again, everybody. This is LoVina Louie with the Native Wellness Institute, and I have a special guest with me today, Shelly Boyd, and we are going to be discussing the Desautel decision. But before we start that, we wanted to just take a moment to pay tribute to all of the children that were found in Kamloops at the residential school in British Columbia, Canada. We've been seeing, a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are struggling with, all of the pain and hurt. So we're just going to start off with a song, and Shelly's going to say a prayer in our Inso Kachin language, our Snikes language, and I'm just grateful that we are here today to offer a prayer and a song as we begin this power hour today. Limlim chinchaspa ustalechast. Limlimsh. And so our hearts go out to all of you. And, we're just grateful and thankful to be here. We're all here because our ancestors made the ultimate sacrifices for us to be here. That's why, we do the work that we do, and revitalization of our language and our culture and our songs and our dances, because we want our future generations to know who they are and to remember the sacrifices that were made so that we could be here. And so we're grateful and thankful today to be with all of you. And I just want to take this time now. I'm going to start. I want Shelly to just go ahead and introduce herself, and then do you want me to share this slideshow first? Sure. Okay. So let's see. Oops.
While you're doing that, I'll kind of talk a little bit. Why peace nach sich den chai squeeze praset. Ihi si khailoe hi stamtima. So this is my husband's grandmother, and I wanted to put her here because she's clearly at boarding school, and we knew that there was no way that we can start anything in this moment in time without honoring and recognizing those babies. And I look at Agnes Christian Boyd here, and she's standing. We don't know exactly, was she at Fort Spokane? Was she at the residential school at Cranbrook? Or was she at the residential school at Kamloops? But the reality is this is another level of generational trauma that we find, and so much is being exposed to ourselves and to the world. I think about us as indigenous people on a greater level, and that's something that leads back to what we're talking about, but it also leads into a greater vision of all of us. And I want to thank the Power Hour, because throughout the pandemic, especially, this has been a source of connection for everybody and communication for everyone. And I think it's important that regardless of how we go forward, that we do this together. I also want to make another observation when I was telling LoVina, as we get to sit here together and have this conversation because we're both doubly vaccinated. And in the seriousness of the pandemic, I think our indigenous communities have really stepped up and gotten vaccinations. And this is something also that we've been prioritized in having happen to us, and not squandering that. And so, yeah, we just all have to do our part. And I'm really happy that because of our tribal affiliations and because of where we are privileged to have these vaccinations.
Mm-hmm. And there are, tribes all over the country are, the number of vaccinations, because we want to protect our people, right? Many of our people died during the epidemics and during smallpox and scarlet fever, and we didn't have a vaccination. And so we want to say, Limlamsh, we want to say thank you in Chaspa'uz Talichas from our hearts for all of you who have been vaccinated and who are protecting our elders and our children and our future generations. And so we're just very grateful for that. And so I'll just go back and we can go back to the slide and so you guys can see the reason why we're here
really quickly before everything was happening was like, where are we going to put different images? Because this has been a long journey. It's been over 10 years long. And here we are in a place where in one photograph, we see the picture of my late husband's grandmother at a residential school. And in another one, you see me holding a sign older than the crown, which is kind of our message that as First Nations people, Sinaichks people in our traditional territory that we have been declared extinct in, saying, hey, we've been here since before the crown. That saying, we didn't cross the border crossed us is so true. Canada, the place Canada was put into our territory. We were not put into the place Canada.
Awesome.
When we talk about the case, and for those of you who don't know, I guess I should have really clarified this in the beginning. We're talking about the Desautel decision today, and it's a landmark decision through the Supreme Court of Canada. We are the first Indigenous people that have won a case in another country. Like we are not we have not been recognized in Canada since 1956. But we were there since time memorial. Our archaeological footprint is there, as well as our memory from our people. And of course, the memory of also those first explorers, first map makers, first Jesuits, first, you name it, anthropologists. We are the people of the Upper Columbia Basin in the Aero Lakes. We are the Aero Lakes people. And this is a rendition, this photograph is a rendition of a village site in Canada, in our traditional territory at Lemon Creek. And it really shows what that looked like at a certain time prior to 1811. 1811 for this case is very important because that's when they say, when we all say like land acknowledgements, this is something that Canada has been doing for a while now. And the United States is just now starting, but it really has to be marked. We kind of get into this thought of being where we are now, but where were we 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago? And so when we do land acknowledgements, when do we want that marked? And it's really at first contact is how they've done it in Canada. The United States doesn't have land acknowledgements yet. I think that they should. I think that we should acknowledge the land that we're on so that we don't forget that we're all tied to that land.
Well, and I think another thing when you bring that up is, 500 years ago, we didn't have borders. Our Aboriginal territory spanned all across North America, and there was no line in between the United States and Canada, and there was no line between Mexico and the United States. That this continent, the whole entire continent, was our Aboriginal territories for over 500 nations. So when you think about that, there are many tribes that, that line separated families, separated people. And so that's why this case is so critical. That's why this case is the first ever in the world. And, I think that's something that people, need to understand, that, just like in Oklahoma, they gave back land in Oklahoma. Tons of land went back. We have, all of the land that you're sitting on, that you're walking on, that you're standing on, that, Walmart, you go to Walmart, that was once our land as Aboriginal people. And I think this case is just like broken down walls, like Trump was trying to build a wall. We're breaking walls down.
we really are. We're really, really breaking down walls. And it's not just for us, it's for everybody that is a border nation. And that's the key there. When we went to the Supreme Court of Canada, one of the things they do is they call them interveners. And interveners are folks who are affected by a decision. So Canada, the Crown, it had interveners, and it was actually every single border province of Canada, the AG, or the Attorney General for each province, intervened against us because it was going to affect them, except for Manitoba. Woohoo, Manitoba. They were like, no, this is truth. We had like 19, I want to say, I'm going to get that wrong. I'm not the attorney person, but we had so many interveners on our behalf, including 2 tribes from the US, and, the Lummi Nation, and I believe it was the Mohawks. I know it was the Lummi Nation, but because they're on our side of the country, but just those interveners show from the US, you've got one side of the continent to the other. And to be an intervener, you have to show that you have a real marked interest in it. And so it's something that both countries, and especially every border nation, has looked at. But looking at what has happened in Mexico, it really does have implications for what has happened with the border there, that the wall has crossed over sacred territory and lands from indigenous people. And this is a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we wanted to talk about this today, because we really wanted to show, we wanted you to hear this story, because as indigenous people, we tell stories. For centuries we've been telling stories, and you can, our stories were in pictographs on the rocks, and you can see our stories all across this continent, and they're beautiful stories.
They are, just like this is a beautiful pictograph. When you look at it, you see it looks like 2 people like holding hands or touching. And I think about that, everything our people did. I don't know what this was about specifically, but I feel like it has to do with love. I think but the symbolism of people coming together. And I think we're at a time right now where we really have to come together. It doesn't matter if you're, which nation you are from. It doesn't matter which, like if you're settler or non-indigenous, it doesn't matter. The thing that does matter is all of us are tied to the land. I think the voice that indigenous people bring is that we remember that voice, I think, quite clearly. And it echoes within everything we do, but we're all impacted. We are all impacted by what happens with the land. And I love this particular pictograph because it reflects a connection that we all need to find at this point in our existence.
Yep.
So now we're going to get to some good stuff. And right here you have Charlie Quintasket and Robert Watt. And I'm kind of going pre 10-year court battle. This court battle with the Crown began in 2010. That was the official date when things began. But it began prior to that. Really, in the 1980s, this gentleman, Charlie Quintasket, the elder there with the suit, and LoVina and I both have memories of him being an elder in our community. And I never saw him wearing a suit, but I love this picture of him because he went into the offices at Victoria and just said, why don't we have a reserve in our traditional territory? We are Sinites people. Well, he said Sinites, because that's how we say our name for ourselves. But the anglicized version is Sinites or Aero Lakes. But he went in there and did that. And then in the 1980s, there was a blockade up there, one of the longest standing blockades in Canada. And it was about our ancestral territory and the ancestors who were being resurfacing there when they were trying to build a road through that territory. And my brother and my dad both went up, and several people from our community and the Colville Reservation in general went up. And this man, though, Robert Watt, who's holding that paddle, stayed up there for years. And we'd go visit him. He didn't have electricity. He didn't have water. He still hauled that stuff in. And
Wow.
I think had it not been for lack of healthcare there, he would still be there. But there's no healthcare or services that we have rights to in Canada.
Wow.
And so this case, as simple as it sounds, like I grew up knowing like we were declared extinct, but you don't really, like your head doesn't wrap around that. And I think we don't process that as children because we know it's wrong. It's like, we're not a dinosaur. We're not like literally extinct. So it didn't make sense. And so it seems like you should just be able to say, hey, I'm here. You know, we'd make, jokes about going to Canada and being like, hey, I'm here. But really to be recognized in a court of law in Canada, it took a great many things to happen. And one of those things that happened was in 1985, Canada included Section 35 of the Constitution that recognizes Indigenous First Nation people. And it's called Truth and Reconciliation. And so when you throw that kind of thought and desire to have truth or reconciliation, you have to get to truth. And so it gave us a little opening. And that opening says that Indigenous First Nations people can hunt and gather in their traditional territory. So they did strategy meetings. Our tribe did some things up front and said, what are we going to do? And anyway, the joke is, but the kind of the reality is too, is that Rick was in that meeting. They were talking and they said, well, Rick, guess you're going to go up to break the law. And that's what he did. He harvested a cow elk. And but that's a beautiful picture of a bull elk. But we cannot overlook the power of the Temu, the animals that helped us. They were there as much as at the Supreme Court as we were, and our responsibility and obligation to the Temu and all the wild things of our traditional territories, no matter where we are still what we need to keep our focus and our heart and our minds on. So the next thing they did was they put in place an Aero Lakes facilitator. Anyway, Jim was, my late husband, Jim was the first territory advisor, and then Virgil Seymour was the second. And I love both of these men, and they died a week apart from one another. And the photo of Jim is overlooking the Aero Lakes, and the photo of Virgil has Frog Mountain behind him. And the photo of me is at a beautiful cedar grove that is right in the heart of our territory. But all three of these photographs are taken in our territory. But what we were kind of challenged to do was to go up there and really start having our voices be heard. What's so significant, I think, about it is that, again, our tribal leadership, because of the way our tribe's leaderships are formed, we, at least on the Colville tribe, every single year we have an election that could change half of our tribal council. So they have to really think about things in a long term, like maybe I won't be here next year, or the support at the table won't be there because it changes so much. And we could have a whole other talk about how I feel like that was something that we were set up to do, to fail. If you look, we have a president that's in place for 4 years, not 2 years. But anyway, these two guys, not only did they have heart, but they were just so incredibly brilliant, both of them in their own ways. And after they both passed, I, had worked with each of them really closely, and I was the next person that they appointed, and we were just going into court then. And so I feel like these guys had so much to do with setting things up, and it was part my responsibility to see it carried through to.
And even the tribal council members that came before, like I remember Dale Kohler and my dad Deb Louie and Joe Pacotis, and like a lot of them, they were a part of this for many years, and we did have some stability on council for some of them, so that they were able to continue to fight this battle and support the facilitators, because you have to, in order for something to keep going, you have to have tribal council to back it and to support it and to say, yes, this is what we need to do. And so, I think, just it's just amazing the vision that people had to have and in those meetings, and to think that a lot of them have passed on now.
Exactly.
So I think that's something that I think about is that as tribal people, we walk in the footsteps of our ancestors, and our ancestors have been standing behind us through this entire battle, through you and Jim and Virgil, just giving us the words and giving us the the fight and the heart to keep going. And I mean, what Rick did was pretty significant.
It was hugely significant. It was hugely significant. And here's a photo of Rick and Linda, and we cannot diminish Linda's role in this. I mean, as far as like being there every step of the way, and Rick had some kind of back issue going on at the time. So that woman was the one who hauled out that elk, like literally on her back. And Linda, right? Linda is super strong. She's like determined mentally, but she's physically strong too. And I just think what a team that brought that to happen and continues to like be that voice. But it was so significant. I might add that Rick is someone that's never broken laws. He's a Vietnam vet. He lives this very, very straightforward life that is just not one where he breaks laws. And Tim Woolsey, one of our attorneys who was in at the time, he was the managing attorney. He said that he gets the call from Rick saying, okay, I got the elk, and I turned myself in. Like, it was very intentional. The whole thing was very intentional. And like LoVina said, it took so much. Like I say this, we stand on the backs of our ancestors, but we also stand on the backs of our leadership. And even now, they're having to look forward to the next, 20 years. What's this going to happen? Or really the next 7 generations is what they're looking at, what we all, should be looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I asked LoVina to put this photo in, and for anyone who has been able to step onto one of our traditional vessels in our traditional waters, you feel a sense of who you are in a greater sense. And I always think that, I don't know, there's a clarity of being in our canoes, but also that connection to our waters. And it doesn't matter what ceremony I have been to, in which territory or whose tribe, we always begin by honoring the water. That is the greatest medicine. And I think that what makes us strong as Sinaic people is being the people of the upper Columbia River. The Aero lakes are really what feed the Columbia, but the double-edged sword of that that's probably why we were declared extinct. I mean, it came down to resources, hydropower, all of those kinds of things,
Mhm.
gold. And the one thing that sustained our life was also the thing that almost took our lives because it was so sought after.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, I think we're, as nations, the revitalization of those canoes, of the dugouts and the sturgeon nose, and it's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to be a part of the canoe journeys, and that is awakening our spirits in so many ways, and songs are coming back, and it's just like we're still here. We're still here, and our ancestors have just been waiting for us to come back.
You touched on that, LoVina, and I think it's so true. We haven't talked at all about this, but I've had several people who've gone to Canada and a song will just come into them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they'll be out on the water and a song will come and then they leave and that song leaves too. But it's so they're powerful. And the first one to tell me about that was Milani. And you knew Milani quite well. And anybody who stick games knows Milani quite well, or they know what her songs sound like. But she talks about the songs that have come to her while she were there,
Mm-hmm.
and how clear they were. And Tom Louie talks about that. I've had other people talk about things, and not to get too personal, but I'm going to share a little bit about Tom's song that I think is really beautiful. We saw the picture, or one of Tom's songs, of Lemon Creek, that historical picture of the village. So that is one of the largest village sites that they've found in the continent. And before it was found, Tom went up there, and that's where that song came. He calls it that place, as a matter of fact. And then I'm like, Tom, like, this was years later. Did you know that they found this huge village site? Because part of that experience for him was seeing this village site. And so there was no way that he had access to that information, but it really is a reflection of, what we have happened to us in that connection. And I'm going to share something, we didn't rehearse this or anything, but share one of the problems that we faced when we were doing the ceremony and the celebration last Friday. On Thursday, there was a terrible windstorm that came through. Mm-hmm. And it was like flipping over these 8-foot tables, and wooden tables. They weren't like the cheap plastic 8-foot tables. They were the heavy, it takes 2 people to, open these up tables. 3 is better. And it's flipping things over. And one of the things that we came to really early in this process, well, really early, we had about a month to do this whole process for the celebration last week, but was that it needed to be based in ceremony, that it's a celebration, but we could not do the celebration without the ceremony and the honoring of our ancestors that had given so much and who continue to feed us. And anyway, I considered like just calling it off, because we got an emergency warning from Avista saying power was going to go out, like all of these things. And Friday was looking worse than Thursday. And so we gathered in our circle. We had been preparing everything for the giveaways and the honorings and everything. And wind is going, like people are getting like sand in our eyes. We can't see. And it's like, what do we do? And LoVina sang a song to clear the way, and Yvette gave us some, Yvette Joseph had other ideas to like clear the weather, balance it out. And immediately the sign came out, and Friday was perfect. The weather was perfect.
Beautiful.
And but it's that reminder that we cannot discount our ceremonies. We cannot discount those things that have gotten us to this place, because it was illegal for us until the 1970s to practice our ceremonies. And it's easy to forget, because we're that generation. For the first generation of our whole lives, we have gotten to enjoy the freedom of religion, but that hasn't always been so. But I think that the intent of that was to take away our belief and to take away our spiritual power that way. And so here we are today talking about a legal case, a very important legal case. And I think it's just important to recognize our ceremony and our songs and some of the things that we're talking about here. Maybe some people will get offended by them, and if, because we shouldn't talk about them, but I just feel differently. And I apologize to anyone maybe that I've said things and they don't like that heard, but I think it's important that we talk about it openly because we can. And because we have to be reminded that we are powerful people.
Yes.
And we need to use our intention, our spirituality, our prayers. We need to use everything about us in a good way.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be afraid to share those things. And that's not saying that we say everything, that we sing every sacred song, that we make everything open. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that we very much need to remember to recognize that we have that power with us. And there are examples that we can say this happened. And we can have this conversation that is very intellectual. It's about a legal case, but also.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like for me, like, when, like, I mean, even at the beginning of the power hour, like when I sang, it was, I can sing, like I normally can sing, but that day when I sang my song, I felt like there was so many things trying to stop it, like it wouldn't come out, like my sister and my mom were there and were helping me, but for me, my body, I felt like I was 100 years old, like when I sang my song. It just wasn't, but I knew I had to push through it so that I could help, so that, because I knew it's not me, it's the creator. Like when we do the work that we do, or when I do the work that I do, for sure, I ask the creator, I ask Colin Sutton to speak through me. I ask him to work through me, to sing through me, to, whatever the people need, that the creator is going to give that to them to help them. And it was probably in all the years I've sang my song, and Mary Louie was the one who told me that song is to clear the way, but that was probably the hardest I've ever, had a hard time singing. And so I'm grateful and I'm thankful, that the creator and he helped me to help our people, and so, but I just think that's what we, like, and one of the things Yvette did is she said, we need to put a knife in the ground, we need to, and so, we put a knife in the ground. I mean, we did, sometimes I think too, because we've been so disconnected from our culture and from, that we do the best we can. And we just ask the creator to guide us, and then he guides us, and that's all we can do. And it was beautiful. And, I just want to say, being a part of the celebration and the ceremony, that, all the people who gave their hearts and their spirits and their energy and their love, and especially to you, Shelly, for all the work. I mean, 3 weeks to put together a powwow and a celebration and a ceremony and giveaway items. I mean, the amount of giveaway items was like, the canoes were filled with giveaway items, and the people got to come out and celebrate and dance, and it was beautiful. And I think we have a picture of that too. I don't know, we get on our thing and we lose track of where we are, but we have a picture of that. And it was beautiful. Well, and or maybe do you want to talk about this first, the appeals? Or
sure, I can talk about that. But I do want to say that, and that is like, we all come together and do our best, and that having and this is where we're really lucky as Indigenous people too. We're the double-edged sword of that, of all of this closeness and love and people that help each other and how much support we have, is the amount of loss and funerals and sadness that we have. And so I also remember to honor all of the pain we suffer too. here's a photo of the celebration, and you see one of our elders, Joanne and Signer, dancing with us, and Jeanette Finley from Fisheries, and myself, and we're getting down. And that was like, we had Tony Louie singing at the end. It was almost like a progression through time that whole day.
Yeah.
You know, we had to start with the old, we had to start with the ceremony and honoring our ancestors and honoring everyone who sacrificed for us to be there. But we had to celebrate that we're still here. Puti kuala, you know, that we're here. And Joanne, like, I don't know what she's, but I love her. I love all of our elders, but we're dancing to Tony Louie there.
Awesome. So, and I think we kind of jumped ahead. So, but we'll just go, show that, the appeal process and what the tribe had to go through in that.
So here's my piece with this. And we had to go to the Supreme Court, we had to win the court case. Then we had to go through the appeal, the first appeal with, they call it the Supreme Court of Canada or British Columbia. And then we had to go through the Supreme Appellate Court. And then we had to go through one. But the thing that I want to say that still bothers me, and maybe I'm venting a bit, but maybe that's what these kinds of programs are for. It's about the real, the real. And the real for me, having gone through that whole process, is that I had in my work, there were so many entities, organizations, government entities that would say, well, after you win at the Supreme Court, then we can move more in recognizing you as people. Because we are the people, we are those voices that were forcibly removed from the land. But what bothers me is I have a friend who's been in prison since he was 17 years old. He did a terrible thing and he's in prison. But the laws have changed since he's gone to prison to where now a 17-year-old cannot be tried as an adult. He's close to my age, he's more your age, but he's lived his whole life in prison and he's done very well. My point is that he didn't get to not be in prison while appeal happens. You're in prison. You're guilty until you're found innocent. For us, I felt like we were guilty of being extinct until we were found innocent of being extinct at the Supreme Court level. Like, we were found to be like alive and traditional. This was our traditional territory, but it didn't hold through. And now, hopefully we'll see a bigger shift. And we have several entities and organizations and that whatnot reaching out, because following the truth is not always easy. My late husband would say, no matter how hard the path is, follow the truth and it's going to be the easiest path through. And when you have, just as we said, that it seemed really obvious that the extinction was stupid and it would be easy to fight that, it also seems like it would be really easy to be on the right side of history and just say that was wrong. But embedded and ingrained in the higher powers of government are entities that exist without our presence. And so not having consultation or not being recognized as, at first it was funny going up into the territory, they wouldn't recognize us at all. And then it got to where they recognized, in land acknowledgements, everybody, like anybody who claimed the territory would be acknowledged. And now they're getting more specific, which they should. And I even feel like within our own tribes, like many of us are completely displaced. I just think that we still need to acknowledge like where we're at. And I, as a Lakes person, I've never lived on my traditional territory of my people. I live on the Skolaupi, and even the Sampuel, that those are the traditional territories of our reservation now, with the north half being off.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think, it's just, we all need to be able to, and even in Australia, like when the Native Wellness Institute, when we went to Australia and worked with the Aboriginals, the first thing they do is a land acknowledgement. They acknowledge the land of their ancestors and or whatever tribe, because they're similar, like us. They have tribes and different tribes, and so that's the first thing that they would do. And that was 2 years ago when we went to Healing Our Spirits Worldwide. And it was beautiful to see the land acknowledgement there, and then to start seeing it come here to the United States and more people doing it. And so yeah, it is important.
It's important, and I think that's a good point, that they do it, because like for us, where we're more inland, I think it's easier to be like, this is this territory and this is that territory. But and you lived over in Seattle in that area for a while, but I'd imagine that it's much more complicated, and I'm not trying to get into that because I don't know it.
Yeah.
but because of how time has gone, you have different tribes that really were there or are there, and how is that land being acknowledged? From what point? Because then you get people who are mixed tribes, and what I found the truth being is that you're recognizing a traditional, you've got to pick a date. You really do. And say, are we recognizing the modern day, people that are here? Or are we recognizing the traditional territory of first contact?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why, when we look at this picture that we have, this picture speaks volumes, in my opinion, because, it's the most, it's just a beautiful picture. And, when I look at this picture, I just see border, rivers, whatever, nothing's going to stop us from saying that this is who we are. And we're proud to be who we are. And we're going to jump whatever mountain, whatever stream, whatever lake, come hell or high waters, we're gonna get there. And and I just love that. I love this picture. It's a beautiful picture, and it's on a magazine. What's the magazine? The Narwhal Magazine. And this is Shelly Boyd right here saying, boom, we're here and we're not going anywhere.
I really give credit. Well, Mike Graham, a young photographer out of Canada, is the one who took this photo. And we were down and he was taking some shots of me in my regalia. And then he was like, can you come over here and do some shots? And I'm like, sure. And then I just walk and I jump over that little creek, because it was a little water inlet. I don't know, you wouldn't call it a creek or a crick or whatever, but a little thing that as the water would come up and go down, that little waterway would get bigger or smaller. And on one side behind me, you see the Kootenai River. And then on the other side where you can't see is like a wetland. And it's really beautiful. Like all this waterfowl comes and different, the frogs are just amazing, and turtles and whatnot. But he was like, wow, you just jumped that. And I'm like, yeah.
I'm not gonna get my moccasins wet.
Exactly. And so anyway, then he said, can you jump it again? And then he had me jump it, like, I don't know, a couple different times at least. And by the end, I'm like laughing, like, okay, Mike, get the shot already. No, he did amazing. But yeah, I felt so happy.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we're getting towards the end, and did you want to? So we talked about that, and so this is like the finale, right? Of I mean, it's almost like the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning. Like there's no like right. It's like now we're just starting, but it's been awesome to be able to have this whole process documented. And so do you want to talk a little bit about this documentation, Older Than the Crown?
Sure. And I'm going to start with, like, you got to have Derek on your show at one point. I get him on here to talk about this. Derek's just brilliant when it comes to like putting together a story that has so many levels. Like there is so much to do with us that isn't captured in anything. Like it's huge. And so he had to take like hundreds of hours of interviews, of information, and pick out, like, how do you tell this story? And I just think he's done a beautiful job. Like you can watch this right now. it's in a 30-minute format. And I say you can watch this, you really can't watch it. It's not public, but if you get a chance to watch it through a university showing or something like that, watch it because it's beautiful. But he did such an amazing job, was able to get a grant through Vision Makers to do a whole hour version, and it will be shown on PBS at some point. That's part of the deal with it. But it's something that you can watch that really tells the story and shows like how did we come from being declared extinct in 1956 in Canada to the Supreme Court of Canada, win that case. And we still have one more thing that we have to do, and that is a ceremony and celebration in Canada. Due to COVID, we haven't been able to do that. One of the challenges that we had with the last ceremony and celebration was we couldn't even do it on our traditional territory. We didn't have a place, you know. So we did it on Squalopi territory, where I live, where many lakes people, like we are diaspora, meaning, our people were put out to many different places, both sides of the river, both sides of the line, but Inchalim ends up being that place where you can take every single person who is lakes and you can tie them to Inchalim. You can't necessarily tie every person who is somewhere to where they're at, whether it's another reserve or reservation, but Inchalim has that kind of mecca to it, only because, it's just where we were pushed. And anyway, Derek did this amazing job of putting this film together and getting these voices and reaching beyond just Inchalim, which we're a strong voice, but the voice is really everywhere. And it's kind of taking those echoes, like he's an echo gatherer, and he's putting them together into a movie. And it speaks the truth. It takes a bit of everything, and I see amazing things for his future because he's a good storyteller. But I also highly recommend the film if you want to understand more.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, like my mom and I and my sister Debbie, we drove over when they did the decision was announced. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. Like I remember Shelly telling me, like, I didn't think anybody was going to really show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, up in Kettle Falls. And, but when we got there, it was like, there were people all on the rocks and, singing songs and like, and I remember Yvonne Swan, she was like, I couldn't walk all the way down there, and so we met Yvonne and she was like, we won, and so it's just like, man, it was awesome, like to see like everybody, standing down there, and people got great pictures of that moment. And how did it feel?
For me, it felt like this out of body experience, and this is how it felt. Okay, so our attorney, Mark Underhill from Canada, like I can tell he's crying. The attorney is crying. Like it just, and it wasn't sad tears. It was like an happiness, and honestly, I kept myself together during that. But after everyone left, I went up to Sharpening Stone and I sang and I prayed and I cried. And I don't even know. It wasn't like, it's not tears. And even now, I don't know where these tears come from. It's kind of like ceremony, I guess, when we, these things come through us. So it's not just our tears maybe or something, and it's not sadness, but it's an acknowledgement of the sadness. But more important than that, it's the hope for the future.
Yeah. It was beautiful to be a witness to that moment of winning the case. And years of fighting and just being able to say, that border, to me, when I heard that we won, it said to me that border doesn't exist. That as Indigenous people, that border doesn't exist, and now we can say it in the white man's way. that, you know, our people can cross and we can hunt and fish and gather
Pick
and pick
huckleberries.
huckleberries. Exactly. You know, but you know, I mean, it was beautiful. And I think, you know, that's something that all across the world, you know, people were calling and interviewing Rodney Costin. Like, I didn't get like 40 different interviews
They
because it was so landmark.
I was there helping to coordinate those, and they went. It started at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I did not. I thought there would be Rick, me, Linda, 4 other people. It was like, holy smokes! But they did interviews from immediately following that. I left at 1:30 finally because I was like, I have to sleep, and they're right down to the last ones. But then I had to coordinate interviews later on from like Scotland and like different time
Yeah.
zones and like big time zone differences and how that impacts. And I guess I want to talk about Scotland for a minute, a little bit, because you know, when we kind of go back to the beginning of this, like how this has impacted us,
Mhm.
right? But we can't forget that everybody was tribal at one time in Scotland. Like that was where like Braveheart was made, or you know, like that story. And I don't want to offend anyone from Scotland or kind of reduce them to a movie, but for us to understand that there are tribal people that are also facing these kinds of things, like
Mm.
being diminished, being, you know, diasporas, being, you know, pushed as extinct, or those things. And I think the most important voice, if you look at like that judgment, is that voice of us being like, we haven't forgotten who we are or where we come from.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter where that place is in the world, there is always those that have that voice and remember that. And it's about honoring that. And I don't know how much time we have, a few
A
minutes,
few minutes. Yeah.
but I do want to say this. I want to say that I think the most important thing that we can do as Indigenous people is speak. And it's it's so easy to think that our voices aren't important or they don't matter or no one's listening. We're like 1% of the population now, 1.5, 2%. You know, we're a very small part of the population, but we are the population that remembers that we are the voice of the Tamu, the voice of the land. And I think that it's important for us to exercise that voice on behalf of them. And that's our responsibility.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's for one another, but especially in these moments of climate change
Mhm.
and what is happening to us as far as water crisis and things like that. We have to speak that because we haven't forgot our ceremonies. They still begin with water. They
Mhm.
still begin with that tie to the land.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, you know, that's just what, you know, I mean, we have language houses and language revitalization, which is another thing that you're like passionate about, and you know, all across indigenous lands around the world.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to bring back our language and bring back our our identity and knowing who we are through our language, which, you know, I mean, I think one of the when Sam Tita, and I just want to acknowledge Sam Tita today, because she was one of our teachers. She's one of the ones who, you know, brought back the Insokchin language, you know, for the Okanagan, for this side of the border and the other side of the border. And one of the things that I remember when Sam Tita was teaching me the word tomb, and the word tomb, when you break it down into the root word, it means the connection between the umbilical cord and the baby, from the mother, the umbilical cord, and the baby. And that's what tomb means in our language. And I remember when she told me that, and I thought, wow, when you think, you know, when I think of the English word mom, you know, it's who gave, you know, who gave birth to me. But when you think of tomb in the sense of it was that lifeline of who I am through my mother, you know, that she fed me for 9 months in her belly, and that Mother Earth feeds us. You know, I mean, when we think of, you know, the deer and the elk and the salmon and the berries and the roots, and that's our lifeline. The water is our lifeline, and you can see pictures of the the different things, like a walnut looks like a brain, or like the rivers look like our veins. And when I think about water, and I think about how much gratitude we have, because we're made up of so much water. It's beautiful. I mean, you know we just all have to keep going and keep trying, to fight these battles and to win these battles, and to just keep fighting to stay alive, some of us. And we pray for all of our people who are still hurting, and who are still suffering from trauma and suffering from pain, and we pray for each other, and we ask the Creator, help us, clear a way for us, because we're still here. And so today I just want to thank you, Shelly, for joining us, for being a part of, this power hour. Lim Lim Shinchas Ba'uz Talichast. Thank you from my heart for joining us today. All of you that, are watching us, that, we love you guys, and we sing our songs, and we say our prayers, and we go into the quilts and into the sweat, and we continue to pray for our people. So Lim Lim Shinchas Ba'uz Talichast. Thank you from my heart.
Ulniuchincha talkin lint. Ulniuchte Rick Desautel. Talik etchkach rusi wasp usi he chinished. Castis kaltmio. Like Rick Desautel has done so much, and Linda, to have that be the last word, is that you can never be, never think that you have nothing to contribute, because look at what one very humble man and his wife has done.
Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that Linda packed that elk out.
Go, Linda.
I'm like, yeah. It's like, man, we as women, bring it on. And so I think that's cool.
Oh, you'll have to have an interview with her just to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, we love you guys.
Right,
Thanks for joining the Power Hour. We'll see ya when we see ya. All right. Where's end? There we go.
Rest.